I've lived in kind of 6 different countries. I came originally from Europe, grew up in Germany, and then moved from there to England, Scotland, and then Holland, and ended up in the United States on the East Coast. And then, and I was married. I have a son who actually lives here with my grandchildren. That is the reason why I actually moved here from California after I lived for a while in the Berkshires in New England. And had the son and so forth. There was a time that I had to move on. So I got divorced from my husband, who was a Sufi director. We had an incredible, beautiful marriage, but our pathways were different. And so I responded, and he moved on, I moved on, and I got back to actually get my PhD. I felt that I wanted to bring some of the hard teachings or the wisdom teachings into academic life. So I went first to UMass and got my BS, and then I went to Simon Fraser University in British Columbia to get my PhD in education, actually, but I focused on the ancient wisdom teachings and developed sort of like this whole idea of a spiritual pedagogy based on 5 schools of yoga. That was my thesis, and then I got tried to find a job, and so I found my first working job in California. And I stayed there and taught there in academic life, both on a graduate and community college level for about 15 years. But I'm also a psychosynthesis psychotherapist and a life coach and an author of several books, and presenter and so forth, and also a spiritual practitioner, because I'm part of higher self yoga. So the idea to focus on the higher self makes sense for me to present that to you, what that really means. And it's the reason why I'm excited about it is because of the changes that I went through. Going through the process of understanding how the higher self works and what it actually really is. So, I don't know whether that's enough of an introduction about me, but I said then, coming here and presenting to you is actually very exciting, because I know Noetic sciences includes the inner sciences, the natural sciences, and then also the goal, to understand what life is all about and to expand consciousness beyond what we know is our conditioned self. And so the higher self, to talk about the higher self makes a lot of sense, because the higher self is never conditioned. It would always be, you can say transpersonal, but then the question arises, can you actually bring it into your daily life? Can you actually really, live it? Day by day, breath by breath. And some of the meditation we did today is actually also a testimony that that is possible. But we never really think about it in terms of the higher self, that that's who you truly are. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. And the other thing what I want to say is I've been a professor in the humanities and ethics, East-West philosophies and so forth. So my highest principle, in some sense you could say, is this very ancient Vedic kind of idea that what the whole pathway of human development and consciousness has to do with synthesizing science, philosophy, and religion. And it's interesting, you know, if you think of it, and it makes a lot of sense how Noetic sciences are really keying into it. So let me say what, you know, sciences again is what I said before, you know, the outer sciences, natural science, inner science, and so forth. So it's all about methodology, all about process, all about means, you know, finding the right means, so to speak, to raise your consciousness, to become enlightened, to become God conscious. Okay, philosophy. So what is philosophy? Philosophy is then that side of you that allows you to think kind of philosophically, abstractly, like we can have higher concepts, higher principles that are not related to our, you know, normal day-to-day life, what we're doing when we're in the body and we are going about living our life. So like a higher principles like love, joy, peace, you know, the whole concept of God. That's really a philosophical state you go into in terms of your mind, trying to understand, you know, how do we understand it conceptually? What does it mean? What's the truth underlying it? Okay, so then religion. A religion in a Vedic sense has nothing to do with church-based religion. Totally not. It's really interesting. It has to do actually with character development. Developing your character, understanding your character. Understanding that we have sides in our character that need to be understood, transmuted, let go of. So we are trying to understand. So religion means that I have the capacity to literally create myself in terms of my character, which brings us to the whole idea that that we are in some ways, you know, really creating ourselves. I mean, we are self-creating and we are integrating, we are letting go. And this whole pathway of becoming, you know, the higher self, the enlightened being, is, you know, the whole pathway of human development and, you know, the destined path for each of us, which I hope you understand. I'm sure you do, you know, that's very familiar to you. So you will see in this presentation a lot of artwork, colorful artwork. And let me just explain this one. You see the forms. You know, these are mountains. You see the lake. You see the horse. You see sort of a light-filled chalice. And then you're asking yourself, what does it really mean? And this painting has been done by Nicholas Roerich. Nicholas Roerich and his wife Helena Roerich, they brought the Agni Yoga teachings to humanity. They were from Russia. And Agni Yoga, Agni means fire, right? Some of you know that Agni means fire. And we talked about the heart, for example, and there's such a thing as igniting the fiery heart inside, or when you go inward, you become a meditator and you begin to see what it's like, you know, in your inner world. And how many of you are meditating regularly? Okay. I'm pretty sure that you would be familiar with brilliant colors or something? Yes? You see, so, okay. And this is the answer. What Nicholas Roerich said, okay, I can, and he lived in the Himalayas. I mean, this represents the Himalayan mountains. But as he was also a teacher, and trying to relay a message about the fiery heart to the people, he said, how about if I superimpose on the form the colors that are inherent in me as, the fiery essence and colorful, light-filled essence of my heart and higher self, and superimpose it, and then bring sort of the outer world and the inner world together and synthesize it, and hopefully inspire something in the viewer when they view it, that whatever it may be. So I want you to look at it from that perspective, to really see whether, and we will do that later again, we go more into the feeling side of it, but in terms of the horse and the chalice here, the light chalice, the meaning of that is that it's actually called Chintamani, and Chintamani means sign or symbol or a truth reality that tells you that Chintamani, that is used in Tibetan Buddhism and Hinduism and so forth as a symbol, that whatever you wish will be drawn to you. You attract what you wish. So, the law of attraction, kind of, you can think of it in that way. So in some ways it represents the law of karma, of course, and the law of Dharma as well, because Dharma means going toward, that level of truth involvement in your life that allows you to expand your consciousness and counteract your karma. Okay. Any questions on this? Sorry, it went maybe a little bit long, but okay, let me go now to talk more about the higher self. So here it says, the higher self is your true nature. It is indestructible, pure essence, and it is pure consciousness, infinitely evolving. I mean, that's powerful, right? And beautiful at the same time, because it really represents the idea that you are, infinitely evolving. You are indestructible on some core level, on the level of beingness, essence of being. And so in the three higher principles that I will tell you are representing the higher self, this comes from Hinduism. And I like the Hindu terms because we can now relate it actually to science, and I'm going to do it in a minute. But it is Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. So Atman is the God within you of infinite potential. So what does it mean? It means it can never be done with, so to speak. It is infinitely evolving and has infinite potential. So that's very important. What do you feel is the important message here when you hear that?
No limitations.
Right. It's infinite, and there are no limitations, exactly. And you can say it's like, to bring it back to the atom, to science, you can say, okay, it's kind of an atomic presence, essence inside of me that nobody can tinker with or even, take away from you ever, kind of thing. I mean, that's the idea. And then Buddhi, the chalice of wisdom, that is linked actually to the heart. Your heart center is directly linked to Buddhi. And Buddhi, in terms of Atman, is sort of the first encasement or the first layer of substance or sublime matter. In case, like the molecule, kind of is part of the substance of the atom, and yet it is different, but it can never not circle around the atom. So you would say the magnetic pull is the atom, and the Buddhi is we say the akasha. We have names now for it, in the universal sense. The most sublime, the most supreme, the most ethereal is Buddhi in that sense. Okay, so and that becomes the chalice of wisdom, and I'll go into it a little bit later. Now, manas, this is very important. Number 3, because even Atman and Buddhi together could never manifest on this plane without manas. And why is it? Because Atman, and this is really hard, took me a long time to really understand this, is that Atman and Buddhi is in some ways just pure consciousness in essence. It's not yet embodied as self-consciousness, because it needed manas, the mind element, so that you can create consciousness in your personality, in your conditioned personality. We all do, right? We know we have an ego self, we know we have a certain amount of consciousness there, and the embodiment in a physical body led to, and the mind principle, manas, led to consciousness to develop in the sense of self-consciousness. That's really fascinating, because that really tells you that the higher self, for example, which is all 3, could never manifest within you without manas. But now that humanity has evolved to the degree, like we are sitting here, we're listening to this, we have developed our minds to the degree that we can actually now, by way of linking with the heart and then higher mind, directly connect to Buddhi and Atman by way of feeling, not only thinking. And that's exciting, because that tells you we are at a level of transformation as human beings that allows us to finally move up the ladder, where we can embrace the we say joy, we say peace, we feel blissful, we feel at times, a sudden urge of something totally out of this world kind of bliss, right? I am sure everybody has experienced that. But, it's nice to experience it once in a little while, but is it really possible to abide in it kind of constantly and permanently? What do we need to do that? That's the big question. And so let's go to the next. Is there any questions to this? Does that make sense to you? Okay. Okay, so I'm always very practical. I like the philosophical and everything abstract and mystical and but at the same time I also like it to see what are the practical solutions here that allow me to really understand with clarity how it works. Now, here are two, and we mentioned the heart. I mentioned the heart center and the higher mind, the manas, the higher mind. And let's start with the heart center because you're so familiar with it. You know, we are doing it here. So you may not have ever thought about that the heart center actually is literally the main link, and it is the link to Buddhi. And it becomes a link to Buddhi and to the higher self. And we always thought it was the throat chakra, the third eye, or the crown chakra. And I've learned from my teachers, thank heavens I have teachers that are, you know, informing me, and I respect them to be much wiser than I am. I came to learn that's actually the heart chakra that links you directly to Atma Buddhi. And that really has determined in me the validity of really cultivating the feeling element of what the heart really represents. And that's really beautiful. So the higher self so the heart center is the link to the higher self. It's also called the wise inner being that at the same time really knows everything about you. And you know, when we talk about the now and the eternal presence, you know, we have a lot of people who teach that now as spiritual teachers, you know, being in the now. That's exactly the reason, because they have realized that with a sense of equanimity and balance and harmony, I can actually live in this dynamical life, you know, that is based on perceptions and my sensing, feeling, thinking, and doing everything. I can do that if I know how to control, you know, and master my senses and my whole body systems. Okay, so the higher mind reveals the higher wisdom coming from the sources and comes to you as inspirations, as visions and messages. So the higher mind again is actually it's like a bridge. The more you intensify your desire to know more of the inner wisdom, the universal wisdom, and you desire to have inspirations and visions and messages, the more that connection will be created. You're literally creating it. You have to create it. If you don't have the desire, it's not going to happen. You know, you have to initiate it. Okay, let me go to the next. Now let's go back to the heart again. And here I'm saying honing your true nature. So the true nature that I'm talking about has to do with that wise inner being inside of you. That's a connection between, you know, is a spirit-matter connection. It really is both. It's not just spirit, but without matter, without substance being encasing it, it can't manifest. So your true nature is always based on truth, you know. That's the foundation. So if I, for example, you know, in academic studies on being a professor, I would never go to that level with the students. The only level you hit when you teach students in academia is meaning. You go to the level of meaning, but you don't go to the level of direct experience of truth unless you do an exercise with them, that leads them inward. That's the limitation of academic studies, and that's why I wanted to go in there, but it's very difficult to actually make it happen. But I managed, actually, to some degree. But what I want you to know is this, that when you feel within your heart a wave of inner warmth or a sudden burst of happiness, it may come when you look at a sunset or something, you don't know, or into the eyes of a child, or, whatever triggers it, it doesn't matter. Or genuine joyfulness and enthusiasm, or a solemn state of inner peace, or impersonal love. We talked about all of that you experienced today. Feeling sacredness of all life. The reason why it's actually great that we're talking about it, because you probably would never have thought that when you said, I feel peaceful today, or I feel joyful or so, that you're actually talking about your higher self. You've manifested. You did it, and you wouldn't know it, you see? And so you can say to yourself, my God, I am experiencing it already, I just didn't know it.
That's great.
And so now, when you know it now, what can you do? Every time first of all, you can consciously evoke it. Second of all, you can say, when you experience it, my higher self is present. And the more conscious you are of it, and the more you bring it into your present moment, and abide in it, the more stable it will become in terms of your daily life and how you go about in your daily life. Okay, so of course I'm a practitioner, so I like practice. I mean, I've always liked practice. I'm a kind of the eternal learner type of person, and I like to teach as well, so it's both. So awakening your higher senses, that would be for those of you who love practice, who love to experiment, who love to really explore and intensify something that is within you but needs to get activated, and you can consciously do it. So, you want to experience joy, beauty, love, and peace. We all know that. We all want to experience that. But how do you do it? And say you often, it is helpful if you say, I have a goal. Is it possible for me to say, can I express joy in my daily life, more than I'm doing now, let's say. Be really patient about it and realistic about it, what you can do and how much effort it takes. So the means would be focus. So the reason why I say focus, focus, focus is because focus, that has been discovered in a lot of, spiritual teachings. In Buddhism or in Hinduism call it one-pointed concentration, right? Why? Because we discovered we have this typical monkey mind syndrome, It goes, my hand is here and my mind wants to go there, or I feel this, or I feel touch. Now I say, what is that? You know, and the mind wants to identify itself continuously with anything physical that happens, or mental, you know, and comes in. So focus means here really to have kind of an intention to be consciously focusing on wanting to feel beauty. Because you know, you can drive in your car, it's beautiful sunshine out there, and you drive, you look in, you know, in front and the back of your cars, and you don't feel you don't feel beauty or something, you know. You're just in the car driving, and whatever happens, happens. But you could make a decision and say, okay, what does it take for me to experience beauty while driving? Can I feel it? I mean, is it possible? I mean, you may be listening to beautiful music in your radio, and you're listening, and you are a good driver. I mean, you know, you don't lose focus in what you need to do in terms of driving safely. But at the same time, you may allow yourself to also have this sense of feeling beauty. But you have to have the conscious intent, you know, to go that in that direction. The same is with feeling love, and the same is with feeling peace. I showed you this picture again from Nicholas Roerg. Actually represents Helena Roerg. I mean, she became a Tara, and Nicholas Roerg became a Master Mahatma in their lifetimes. But what do you feel when you see this? You feel that in your, what does it feel like, or emanate, this painting?
Spiritual awakening, totally focused, giving like a master.
It's the view of the larger than self, local presence.
And you can see there's no friction, right? There's this total peaceful, harmonious presence of space, infinite space being holding you.
Yeah, it's so clean, and it's very clean, and it's almost, it feels like it's above the line where you have to breathe even. There's no need for oxygen even.
Right, this just to have you a taste of it, you know. That's why I wanted to show you this, and you know, I can recommend seeing Nicholas Roerg's painting. It's just really a treasure. Okay, so strengthening higher senses. So again, you know, I mentioned it before, to have the intention to consciously activate and cultivate feelings of joy, beauty, love, and peace in your daily life. And, you know, I tried to say it before, but it needs to be activated and cultivated by you consciously. And there is, in practice, and I'm sure those of you who have practiced for a long time, at one point it becomes effortless. You know, you don't have to anymore do it consciously. It becomes second nature, but it takes time. So intention number 2 is consistently expressing and sharing joy, beauty, love, peace, and happiness in your daily life. So again, you know, you can focus on what's wrong with me, and why do I have this pain? Am I healthy? Should I worry about this, or, you know, be fearful about that? that would be, going into what we call more lower nature aspects of who I am. The conditioned side of my personality. But if you want to intensify this fiery heart quality in terms of your higher senses, you have to literally begin to express it and share it. Joy has to be shared to actually be felt, and children sometimes do that naturally, and then they are educated out of it pretty much, and they lose it because they are taught that the mind matters more than anything else. And so often they are our teachers, they can be our teachers, but at the same time we can now do it consciously, and therefore what you're literally doing is you're developing your fiery heart quality, and with it you're also instilling sort of a living vibration within you that's completely whole, that's completely embracing you of who you truly are. It's like befriending yourself, So the achievement of 1 and 2 would realizing living by way of your higher senses affirms being fully in your higher self. It's not the only way how you can do it. You can also focus on service in the world as a humanitarian expression. Anything service in a humanitarian way. But here's the trick. Say, if you do it and say, oh yeah, I'm going to make really good karma if I do this, and I help these people, and then those, and they're going to, and I give them all the money, and oh God, yeah, and I have such good karma after that. You're missing the point. It's like in terms of karma yoga, the Eastern, the Hindu people have developed karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, yoga of love, yoga of knowledge, and then yoga of service. So in the karma yoga sense, the idea is that whatever you do in a humanitarian sense and service, you give up the results to the highest good, to the common good. You say, you're putting something, you have the right intention, you're putting it into action, you're doing the best you can, but you always give it up to the highest good. And then your ego doesn't get caught up in it, whether it happens or it doesn't happen, and then you're not developing, the wrong sense of ego self. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so everything that I've said so far, of course, you realize with it comes certain sense of self-responsibilities. And the step number 1 is to raise self-awareness and deepen your self-understanding to forge full self-acceptance. And what that means is you're really saying that everything I'm experiencing, is lawful. It has a cause, effect, and consequence. Therefore, I can literally deal now that I know that awareness is a faculty of consciousness, that I can consciously say, why does this person irritate me? Or why do I hate this person? Or why do I get irritated or upset right now? And rather than identifying with the emotion itself, you can disidentify from it and say, okay, I'm upset right now. Full acceptance. no critic. You're not saying, you shouldn't be upset because if you want to be spiritual, you shouldn't be upset. No. You say, I'm upset right now. You realize that as a state, and at the same time you know there's a reason why you're upset. It doesn't happen for no reason. So why would you be your judge on that one? It's not even kind, you know? So instead of judging yourself and working through your inner critic, what you do is you ask yourself literally the question, you know, why? What's going on right now? If you don't have the time, you're on a job, you say, I'm going to do it tonight. You know, in an evening review, I'm going to go back over my day and say, oh, this piece and this piece is really what I like to know more about it, and I will reflect on it, and then sooner or later you will notice that you can let go of that tendency and you can transform your character, religion, remember I talked, into somebody who eventually you don't need to do that anymore. You're not anymore hooked on the attachment connected to being irritated or whatever it is, or fearful. But full self-acceptance is key. And why? Because you want to befriend yourself. Your body, your emotions, your mental set, everything can be part of who you are as something that you have developed that can be changed and transformed, integrated and let go of. Step 2 is awakening your true nature by cultivating your higher senses. I talked about that. And step 3, owning your higher self with a sense of knowing who you truly are. This is really very powerful. Like, if you're upset and you're in the state of knowing that you're identified with some conditioned something, if you remember that and you say, you know, despite of what's going on, I have that sense of inner knowing of who I truly am, will confirm your higher self within you consciously, even if you don't feel it. But that affirmation is like a reminder and a recentering kind of method to go back to who you really want to be. And you always do it without judgment, never self-judgment. You don't judge yourself, ever. And that's hard to do. I know it. I'm a therapist myself. I mean, I went through it myself. It's easy to judge yourself. This inner critic is interjected. Everybody has it, right? Mm-hmm. But the inner critic is actually a distortion of the wise inner being, your higher self, because your wise inner being is nothing but love and compassion and knows everything about you and would never judge you. It would try to help you understand what you're going through. And that's powerful. And here are some of conscious awareness tools that you can use to develop certain qualities in you. The first one is vigilance. The conscious awareness to number 1, vigilance. Vigilance means that you address and challenge each resistance and obstacle as it arises in your mind, heart and body directly. You really deal with it. And vigilance, actually, when you start to go on a spiritual path and then you have certain, blissful experiences and all of that, we have this fantasy often arises that one day it's always going to be that way, and I'm on a cloud in heaven, and I will never ever have to deal with that crap again, you know, that's interfering with my sense of peace and joy. Well, you know, and you learn, and even, you know, even the Mahatmas or the Taras or the saints, they always say, I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect. You can never really be perfect to the extent, otherwise Atman infinitely evolving. Wouldn't make sense. You know, you're never a finished product or a subject or however you want to call it. So vigilance is like really taking that as something you need to be in your heart and mind all the time, really. I know it's, you know, it's sort of disappointing that that you can't get the message, oh my God, you know, finally I got it and I'm out of this and I'm forever saved. Well, I have to tell you this, that as long as we are on an earthly plane and embodied in a body, you know, and we're here for a reason, so you can say, yeah, it's a bummer, but on the other hand, it's actually terrific because it allows you to develop wisdom that then goes into the chalice of your higher self, and you're literally becoming wiser and wiser by going through the obstacles and resistances and everything you're going through, by learning that eventually you become stronger and stronger. Actually, you know, we learn through obstacles often, and we are surprising ourselves that we are actually so much stronger than we thought we were. And say, if you always just live in a secure environment, you know, and you never test yourself, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't even know how strong you are. So it's a blessing, a mixed blessing, if you want to say it that way. Conscious awareness tool number 2, compassionate understanding, integrating and accepting personal strengths and weaknesses. So what happens, the more you work with your higher self, the more love you develop in the impersonal sense, just like we did today. But at the same time, we are also opening the heart toward compassion toward yourself, you know, and your own suffering, and compassion for others. And again, you know, to be compassionate for your strength and your weaknesses is a beautiful way of becoming a whole person, actually. And eventually, you know, what happens is you actually become more and more humorous, because, you know, whenever you have the idea, oh, I really got it now, you know, something is happening and booms, you realize, oh, wait a minute, you know, you can't assume these things like that. It just doesn't work, you know. So then you say, oh, okay, I'm back again in, you know, this pattern is trying to pull me off. And this is something you need to really know, that the oppositional side of you, the conditioned side of you, gets really miffed when you start to rise your consciousness toward who you really are. That part wants, how dare you? You want to be wise? Hey, you didn't do what you were supposed to be doing today. Or something comes in. You see what I'm saying? So that part is going to really test you. And so you have to expect that when you work with the higher self more and more intensely, that your conditioned self is going to arise powerfully and try to pull you back to where you've been. And that's called the dweller. It's indwelling within you still, because you haven't fully released it, and so it has a pull on you. So just be aware of it, and that's why a lot of people can't do this work. It's for some, because by once you go toward this path, like in my case, you can't return anymore. You've gone so far that there's absolutely no turning back anymore. And you take that for what this means and understand that's exactly what needs to happen, and it's fine. But I have to say, it would be naive to say that we can say, oh yeah, we have no resistances, no challenges, no obstacles, no suffering ever coming my way anymore, kind of thing. No way. But the counterbalance and the whole trick is to really begin to befriend yourself, become friends with who you are in the higher self sense, but also who you have developed to be in a conditioned sense, and befriend that as well, even though it's very limiting or limited or whatever you want to call it, And when you do that, then you begin to really embrace you, not just like a human being who was born this lifetime and has come to this point in age. Then you are beginning to embrace you from ancient times and many lifetimes. I don't know how many of you believe in reincarnation, but if you don't, this whole concept of the higher self would be difficult to grasp. Because there comes, I mentioned before that as you go through your conditioned self and you develop a sense of self-awareness and you begin to integrate and let go and understand and become more self-compassionate, you're developing what's called the power of discrimination. And discrimination, for example, as a professor or something, nobody can ever teach it. Only life teaches you that. Your path in life, through walking your path, you learn discrimination. Meaning, you learn how to differentiate between what is true and what is false, or what is true and what is an illusion, or, a false identity and your true nature and true identity. And this is why, for example, when Buddhism came about through Buddha's teachings, a lot of people picked up on his teaching, and a lot of people became literally enlightened, and they wanted to just, move on, sort of the ascetic type of, saying, goodbye everybody, I got it, I'm going to go up in space, and here I am, and my consciousness is universally there. That was where a lot of people went after the first, it's called sort of the Hinayana Buddhism. But then it became Mahayana Buddhism, where now Buddhist teachers came about and said, my enlightenment, or the project of enlightenment, is the path to enlightenment on the earth, walking my talk. And these are the bodhisattvas. They said, okay, we went up the wall, we saw the light, we experienced it all and said, wow, amazing. They didn't jump like the ascetics or the Hinayanas to freedom. They said, oh my God, let's turn around and teach it to everybody else on the other side. These are the bodhisattvas. And they're the real, compassionate teachers who, it's a sacrifice, in some ways to do that. And that's their, their mission. So conscious awareness tool number 3 is fearlessness. You are daring, you're kind and firm with discrimination and insightfulness. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions on this one? Yeah.
Would discernment be a better word maybe than discrimination?
Say that again?
Would discernment maybe be a better word than discrimination in terms of understanding what, discrimination has a real
better word? Did you say the
word, discrimination?
Oh, okay.
Discernment is what you're saying.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, discrimination and discernment are the same thing in this context. I know we have now racial discrimination, so yeah, it wasn't the case for a long time, so we could use the word. Yeah, but discernment is the word that is meant by this. Okay, anything else? This is something that I wanted you to experience, maybe have sort of more an experiential. This is sort of one of the final slides that I want to offer you, but I want you to, for example, focus on this image. See the flowers there and the tree and the people walking in the sky. If you take that into your heart, what does it feel like? What is your experience? Try that.
It feels alive. I think especially because the people, although you can't sense their connection to the land the way the picture is. I can't. But
okay, any other experiences?
It feels like connection and above the esoteric and the oneness and all that, but grounded in the differentiated earth plane energies, so that this thing that's limitless potential has a place to live within the waveform. Right? Within the beauty, in order for there to be beauty and harmony, there has to be some kind of movement. Mm-hmm. And the potential doesn't have that movement until it comes into that.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. Any other comments?
An awe of nature. What I feel is an awe of nature.
Mm-hmm. And you know that the flower is a symbol of the heart, of course. And it's always been a symbol. I mean, we know the lotus flower, but because when you see a flower, that the roots came from the earth, they moved through it, they had to take in all the environmental nurturants, from air and sunlight and water and all that. But then comes a flower. How could that be? From brown roots and then green stems and leaves, this flower colorfully blue, and I mean colors that are not in the earth per se. So it's always been, you know, a symbol of the fiery heart, the heart that, you know, is light-filled, can be light-filled, if not blocked, but, you know, and can abide in beauty. You can choose any other of these images and focus on it and see what you feel in your heart when you look at it, and take it into your heart. Anybody has focus on one particular one, different one?
It's explosive. So that's, I guess that maybe is.
Which one did you focus on?
Well,
This
I was just thinking about
of all of
most
them.
of them, yeah.
Mhm.
And, you know, the symbology of a flower, you know, just springing forth in such beauty and, you know, coming from something that is so, you know, nondescript and, you know, brown and whatever. And but yeah, it's like a wellspring that is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
What it seems to represent, and so there's always something there, deeper. You know, it's just a matter of
Right.
releasing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't get away from the first one. The power of the sunlight in that. Is
Oh, this
just-
one.
No, the first picture.
Oh, okay.
Just
Yes.
coming to the tree, just bringing life to everything. The flowers, the green, the people. I just feel the sunlight
Mm-hmm.
on that. I mean, it seems to be in all of them too. But boy, that first one, really lovely.
Yeah, actually, you know, that's actually a photo. This is not a painting.
Or a painting, yeah.
It's a photo. It's from in China somewhere. Yeah, and these are all paintings. And I particularly love this one. It's like, you know, when we talk about joy, and I think it's called the sisters, flower sisters. Flower, you know, I feel that sense of joy, really, being so close to one another, enjoying each other's beauty and abundance and freshness and whatever words would come to you. Yeah.
They all depict life,
Mm-hmm.
and the beauty and the freshness and everything of life. And there's a sadness in that because we're so focused with meeting, and we become so focused on death,
Mm-hmm.
destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And so the picture in the upper right-hand corner in particular, as I looked and thought about it for a while, I really felt sad because, I mean, to know that it's a photograph from like in China or something is really encouraging because there's still some place on earth that has that pristineness about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we can take that and we can hold that in, you know, that image and focus, almost like projecting as we go through, instead of going home and becoming addicted to what's on TV or whatever, on the computer. We can keep those in our mind
Right, right.
and in some way make a difference, at least for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which helps to make a difference for somebody else
Mm-hmm.
and others. You know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? And
Bottom right, speaks to me. In
This
that
one?
It's like the presence of the foreground is flowers in the earth, and I'm picturing the rest as the cosmos. And even though in the mind there's a tremendous distance between where the flowers are growing and where the universes are, the galaxies, there's a conversation that's instantaneous between them. They know that it's just oneness, regardless of this thing called space that we've kind of spun into being just to have the experience. It's still just oneness.
And somehow that's beautiful you bring that up. I really like the way you share it. It also shows that it's not empty. You know,
No,
it has, yeah.
About communication between,
Exactly. You know, that oneness doesn't mean emptiness or doesn't mean different, essential forms. I like to think of it more vibrating, living forms. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yeah.
Just to join with what he said, is that I believe plants have a higher consciousness as we do. And I feel like there is a vibration that is connected with that, and maybe why we do connect with nature. But I feel like I'm feeling that.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes, I think whoever did these, especially the top two and the bottom right, and just speak so loud to me. The essence, this person really captured just the essence, the energy, the crystalline clear.
And always remember that this is your higher self speaking to you as you are feeling this. Really own it as...
The flowers on the lower right, the yellow ones.
Can you speak up a little bit?
The flowers on the yellow flowers on the right, the bottom. To me, those flowers are dancing. I mean, it's an energy. To me, it feels like they're dancing. They're dancing with joy.
Yeah.
It's joyful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Okay, I mean, I just want you to get a little bit of a taste of what the higher self really is all about. And here's our last one, and I repeat again the first one simply for you to realize that Shintamani is with you all the time. You are creating your reality at any moment, and you're reaping the consequences at any moment, and you can change it at any moment. And it's really available to you at any moment to have that brilliance, that colorful reality there, even though you don't see it in the world necessarily. Now, this one, it's also from Nicholas Roerich. The reason why I wanted you to see it is to understand that here, obviously, this is the earthly realm, darker here and more dense and stuff. Then there is water in between, it's sort of the emotional life representing it. And then here is kind of like your own citadel of your fiery heart. That when you're on that side, you're actually linking up to the ones on this side through a silver cord. And the silver cord has nothing to do with the earthly colors per se. It really has essentially a higher vibration of life within it that goes beyond it and will always be part of you on that side. And I'm meaning it actually in the subtle plane, say when you die and you go, release your body and you let go and you go up through the subtle plane stages to where you're supposed to go. What I'm saying again, that the validity of the ancient Vedic principle of method, philosophy and religion is really valid, because with the right means, the right direction, the right connection, you will eventually collect all the wisdom inside of you that will strengthen and grow your higher self into a self-conscious, realized being, whether it's a saint or a Mahatma or an avatar or or a Tara or whatever you want to call it. But the reason why I want you to see it, to say that nothing here on earth goes with you other than the wisdom you gained and accumulated over time. And then the Atma Buddhi becomes not just pure essence and indestructible true nature, then it is self-consciousness itself, being able to master vibrations to such an extent that you can consciously deal with that essence on very universal and individual levels, collectively, socially, culturally, but beyond that as well. Okay, I think that is about all I want to say. A little bit of references is some of my books that I wrote. I studied, I did one on evolutionary peace leadership, meditation, integral ethics, and then how to live from your heart, and higher self yoga books, of course. And Nanette Hacknell is my teacher, my spiritual teacher. Okay, I think that's all.
Do you mind going back to the two last pictures so that I can look more closely at those, please? Yes, thank you.
Okay. And if you have any questions or anything, comments you want to tell me or want to share, yeah.
Could you say more about, you alluded to the inner critic being a distortion of the wise self, and then you also talked about the opposition, and I wonder if you could say more.
Yeah, the way the inner critic actually develops is that we know now in terms of consciousness studies that when you as a child develop, you introject the way you are treated by your parents, your culture. Say if you are hated, if you are bullied a lot, if you don't receive the love that you really are, you really are that, but you don't receive it or it's not given to you, you will probably develop a sense of self-doubt, unworthiness, a feeling that you don't count. You may have a lot of fears, but in it comes also this inner critic develops that says, that judges you constantly for what you're doing, because after all, you haven't experienced that you've been accepted as a child. And then often what you develop is kind of a perfectionistic ego self. Then the ego self wants to be really, really perfect. And if the ego self is really, really perfect, then, I can repress that I don't, have a sense of self-worth or something. And I can pretend, it's this kind of a false identity, pretend that I'm perfect. And often perfectionists, they cannot handle people who make mistakes. Because if they do, they mirror back to them that they are not perfect, and then they get miffed, and then they get really upset about it. It's really interesting. I mean, that's just psychology and consciousness studies in terms of developmental stages, as you go through as a child.
But you said it was like a distortion of the wise self?
Yeah, the wise inner being. If the child would have experienced to be loved what the child deserves to experience, then the higher self element of that wise inner being can be present already. But if it's not, then the inner critic takes its place, and it literally blocks the higher self. You can't access it. That's why when you deal with a higher self, you have to really understand that you have to do, your self-awareness project in terms of deconstructing your ego self on the one hand, and going into repressed unconscious elements that are lingering there like attachments or ropes pulling you back, or that come out like impulses. Have you ever experienced that you want to do something, all of a sudden you feel this impulse, you don't even know where it comes from, but you think because it's there, has a reason to be there, and I have to respond, rather than you saying, oh, there's an impulse. Where is it coming from? You can deconstruct it. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I would just like a little more clarification about the impulse.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if as a child I've been wounded, then the wounding part, and then, I've had authoritarian parents, then the idea is that I repress it. I can't live and experience directly these emotions. But say you go then to school and your parents aren't there, and then you get bullied or something. Then all of a sudden it can get triggered as an impulse, and you lash out something you've never seen you do before, because it is repressed somewhere inside of you. In need, it needs to be triggered, literally, to get activated.
Like taking a gun and killing all of your classmates or something like that.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Like taking a gun and killing all of your classmates or the people in the mall or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That is something inside of them, that they have repressed, and it's there, leading you to do these kind of actions. And because you're not self-conscious, you don't know about consciousness and self-awareness, they have no way of stopping it. They just take the gun and kill,
But I had an experience recently, and it was coming out of Trader Joe's and having a sudden impulse to make a phone call to my son.
Mm-hmm.
No thinking. It was total impulse.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so it came forth. And I think that's something different.
Yeah, that's different. That's when you have a love connection with your son and your intuitive link to your son. So there is a love relationship between you and your son, and your intuition. Intuition is the faculty that allows you to know something without mental interference instantly, It's part of actually the faculty of higher self, intuition. I wanted to say something to you. I have an email. If you want to be in touch with me, and I'm going to put up there a sheet where you can leave your name and a phone number and email address. And the reason, because, if you want to know more about this higher self, eventually what we're trying to do is we want to really scientifically prove and show that the higher self exists. Because even if I talk about it here, how the mind goes. You go outside and say, I don't know, what we just did, and and you begin to go back to doubting things and questioning things, which is a good thing. you know. But we in Higher Self Yoga, actually, we are really interested at eventually bringing something about that could scientifically be shown to be a testimonial evidence to show that the higher self really exists. But and I also I do leadership courses. I'm starting to do it now here. I mean, I came here 2 years ago, so I'm still developing sort of my professional persona here. But I would love to stay in touch with you, those of you who are interested. So I will put this email list up there if you're interested to give me your information. I would be very grateful. It would be lovely.
A couple of years ago, we had a gentleman come and who had been trained through a program developed by a Dr. Michael Cotton, Higher Brain Living. I wondered if you'd heard about that and any thoughts about that.
Say that I have not heard about him.
Okay. A lot of what you're talking about, there's some similarities to that. This is much more academic, and his was much more about marketing, and which was interesting of and within itself. I was just curious if you'd heard of him.
No, sorry, I have not. I mean, yeah. Yes.
You mentioned taras. I don't understand what taras are. I've heard of something called green tara, white tara, and red tara. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there are different taras. If you, for example, decide to you are more inclined toward the feminine principle. I didn't talk about the dual origin here, but the feminine principle is that comes from the mother of the world, that is really helping humanity to, learn what it is to ascend to the higher realms, and also to learn to soar in your subtle body, and learn to develop your fiery heart, and all of these qualities. And so the taras are the ones who decide they want to not choose to become a Mahatma or an Arhat, which is the masculine embodiment, if you will, in consciousness. A Tara is the feminine embodiment in consciousness. Avalokiteshvara in Tibetan Buddhism is actually both masculine and feminine. So at one point in your development, spiritual development, psychological development, you make a choice and say you feel drawn to become a Tara, or you feel drawn to become a Mahatma. And these are things that happen, as you progress in your own growth. And I mean, we've been told to not even think about it because we are not developed enough to really know what the right final outcome should be.
What's the difference between the red, white, and the green taras? Are those stages of development?
No, the green, the red, the white means rays. The inner rays, the color rays. So the green tara would operate in relationship to the green ray, and also in relationship to what that means in terms of the subtle planes, and how to work with it. And the white tara, of course, would be the synthesis of all colors, kind of, and the red tara and so forth. So they have chosen, and often they work with inner masters and inner higher beings that help them develop in that direction. This is the other thing that I want to say. As you progress, that's my personal understanding, and I feel responsible to say it, because particularly in the United States, people question the validity of the teacher a lot. You know, everybody wants to do it themselves, and that's fine. You can do it to a certain degree yourself, but there comes a point where it's like this. Do you believe you could ever be the sun? I mean, could you believe you could ever be alive, vitalized without the sunlight on this plane? Say, if we had no sun, we are all in, you know, moonlight only. What I'm saying is that there's such a thing as something you need to nurture your own vitality from within in relationship with your higher self, that literally needs, for all the transmutation and all the transformation you're going through, that kind of input. So eventually, if you really want to ascend to a higher plane, it cannot be done without the wisdom, the guidance, and the energy that you receive from those who guide you. That goes a little bit far, you know, I realize that, and a lot of people question that, and that's fine, you know, you don't have to believe any of this, but maybe the reason why I'm even mentioning is because I was one of the people, you know, I come from Germany, we are very mental, you know, and they definitely want to do everything themselves, and I had from past lives actually also come to realization that I should be doing it myself. You know, I had Buddhist teaching backgrounds and stuff, and for me to learn that that is actually a mistake was an amazing revelation. You know, I had no idea that that is true, and then I realized I would never be the person that I'm now without it. Their help, their continuous presence and help and guidance. And I'm glad I have a teacher, because it keeps my ego in you know, it's so easily to get caught up in this ego thing. Oh yeah, I can be a great presenter, you know, and I can do this, this and this, and I can wrap my need for glory or self-value or whatever around this. But it would still be a false identity that I'm developing. So when you have teachers who are, you know, not just embodied but also, you know, in the subtle plane, then you become aware that I will never know fully what really needs to happen in terms of here, you know, in terms of our plane. I mean, I can talk about enlightenment and everything I talk to you about, but how it needs to happen, what the next stage is, cannot come if I don't allow myself to get the direction from above. And that is a wonderful, you call it surrender, you know, and it's actually very beautiful. First it's frightening, you know, because your ego doesn't want to surrender. But then when you learn that surrender is actually really a form of liberation and a form of, yeah, it actually even teaches you to collaborate in ways you didn't even think was possible. You know, real community building, you talked about that, was really interesting, of community building or team building or being an individual, self-realized, yet you collaborate. Always sharing is actually the key, because you know when you share, there's no ego involved. You just share your wisdom, you know, and see what happens. You don't know. You just, it's an offering, right? Well, anyway, then.
Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much.